High Commissioner Cara, thank you very much for coming into the British Chamber office this morning. I do know that you and your team are incredibly busy at the High Commission. Maybe on behalf of the members, you just want to update what is going on at the moment.
Yeah, gladly, Richard. So each morning that I wake up, I am struck once again by what a really unprecedented situation we're living through. Never in my life have we seen a pandemic that has gone across the world with the pace and the impact that this has. So I think for all of us, all of the British Chamber members, for us in the British High Commission in Singapore, but in posts all around the region and around the world, this has become main effort, coping with the impacts of COVID on our business. I know as well that lots of you who are members of the British Chamber, you have based yourself in Singapore, but you have a regional remit. So you also, like us, will be thinking about how operating from a base in Singapore, which actually your members have shown that you have high levels of confidence in how Singapore is handling the COVID outbreak. You also, like us, will be thinking about how your people and your offices in Singapore can support those that are dealing with more challenging situations across the region. I'm also really conscious that this is a situation that has really big human impacts. All of us that are away from loved ones will be thinking about them and what we can do from a distance to help keep them safe. I think some of us, some of your members, are currently experiencing family separation for people, work pass holders or the dependents who haven't been allowed to come back to Singapore just yet. And I realise that must be incredibly stressful. And later maybe we can talk about what we're doing to support people in those situations. In terms of what the team in the British High Commission is doing, this is now our main effort. There is very little of what we would call business as usual going on. We are focused entirely on what we can do to support British nationals, British interests and British business through this unprecedented issue. So in Singapore, the consular team and I are focusing on how we can support vulnerable British nationals that have been caught up in some of the ramifications of COVID. We are also thinking about how we can support families who have been separated, and I can give some details of that later on. We are supporting British High Commissions and embassies around the region. In some of those places, we have large numbers of British nationals that really want to get home, and they don't have very much commercial flight capacity to get out. So me and my team have been doing a lot to talk to Singapore Airways, to talk to Singapore government about how we can help in those circumstances and to offer some remote support to our teams around the region in supporting British nationals. And then I think there is a really important part of work that we're doing, which we call the economic response. We're supporting the UK response, domestic response to COVID by helping source the kind of medical equipment that our system needs. And Singapore is a bit of a entrepot for those kinds of goods. So we're dealing with some suppliers here and also supporting the team in China who are doing really great work on this. But we're also thinking about the longer term economic impacts. Things aren't quite going to be the same after this, whenever after this is, as they were before. In some senses, it has accelerated transformations inside businesses, for example, working from home and how companies feel about that. But there are also going to be some really challenging impacts of what has happened in the recent weeks and in the weeks and months to come. And so the team inside the British High Commission, the economic response team, is looking at what government can do to support British businesses as they're operating internationally. That is a major focus for the Secretary of State for International Trade. And our team here is working with their colleagues right across the region with oversight from Natalie Black, who many of you know, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner, to try and make sure that we've got the right feed-in from British business about what you would like us to do to support. More broadly in the region, we know that Singapore continues to be a hub, and we are really focused on supporting our colleagues in doing what they need to do to support British nationals.
So, Cara, thank you for the comprehensive overview that you gave. As you know, as a chamber, we've been actively engaging with our members. We did a detailed survey on COVID about a month ago, and actually we followed that up with a number of flash polls, one around the travel restrictions that came into place in Singapore, and one that looked at the resiliency budget that was announced last week. What that's given us the opportunity is really getting the mood and feedback from the members, and I know that we've been feeding that back to your team to help inform and influence your conversations with Singapore government. Actually coming out of that, also the members have been raising a number of questions, and I thought this would be a good opportunity if we could maybe touch on those questions, so you can give an opinion or review on where the High Commission is on that at the moment.
Yeah, delighted.
Okay, so maybe if we start just, you spoke in the introduction about this being the impact on humans, and we do know that there are families who are split across geographies at the moment. Actually, maybe a starting question was, what advice do you have to those who may need to urgently go back to the UK, for example, a family emergency?
Yeah, well, that is the kind of human dilemma that is really even painful to hear about. So I know that the government of Singapore is really serious about maintaining control of the flow of people that come back into Singapore, and that everybody absolutely has to get permission to return if they've chosen to go. I think we've had cases, haven't we, within our community of people that have come back without that permission, and they've had their work pass cancelled. And they've had to leave Singapore pretty sharpish. So you wouldn't want to get into that situation. But that is a really challenging human situation. And I think we would look to try and give whatever support we could to somebody that was in that situation to get a kind of compassionate approach to them wanting to leave and come back. At the end of the day, it's the Singapore government that makes all of these decisions. But in this circumstance and in some other circumstances that you may ask me about later, we are going in and we are speaking to the Singapore authorities and making the case for a compassionate approach.
Yeah. So at the moment, it's fair to say that the Singapore government is being quite strict on those re-entry permits, and we just need to abide by those parameters.
Yes, exactly.
And then for those who might be subject to stay-at-home notices or quarantine orders, what advice from the High Commission to those people as well?
So stay-at-home notice, do what you're told, basically. I've heard, we've had quite a few questions that have come into the High Commission saying, I want to leave, could I leave earlier? I can tell you now that the stay-at-home notice list is cross-checked with people that are getting on planes, and if you try to do that in advance of your 14 clear days of stay at home, you will be intercepted. You will not be allowed to board the plane. And you've seen that there are talks of fines and possibly even imprisonment for people that don't follow the rules. So I think you really absolutely need to respect this 14-day instruction.
And you just touched on flights there. I know earlier this week, the Foreign Secretary announced almost a repatriation package or budget to get British nationals home. What would be the impact on Singapore? Are there actually commercial flights at the moment? Is there availability with this package support here?
Yeah, so flights are still flying between the UK and Singapore. Airlines are obviously looking at uptake of seats, and they're making decisions, often commercial decisions, on how many flights they're going to fly. We normally have access to 6 direct flights a day, even just between BA and Singapore. Now there is much lower number of flights at the moment. So if people are visitors here, or they have family that are visiting here and they want to make sure that they're getting back, they should really keep in close touch with the airlines to make sure that they have got the latest information. But in terms of the package that the Foreign Secretary announced, I think there were 2 things there. Number one was us working wherever across the whole network, and also centrally in London when it applies to UK airlines, to encourage all of those airlines to keep flying their commercial routes to allow people to move. There's sort of unprecedented, astonishing numbers of people that are trying to get home at the same time in the midst of tightening border controls and reduced commercial capacity. So we're doing what we can to encourage people to still fly, airlines to still fly. The other bit of the announcement is unlikely to apply to Singapore. This was the announcement of a £75 million package for us to arrange specific repatriation flights for British nationals who find themselves in a country where there is no commercial provision, where there are large numbers of British nationals and where we have real worries about the healthcare system. Now, none of those things apply here in Singapore, but they could apply in some countries around the region. For the moment, my colleagues and I in Asia Pacific are continuing to work with the airlines to make sure that there are commercial options continuing to fly.
One of the key outcomes of the surveys we did was that our members are saying they've got still a high degree of confidence in Singapore, the way the government's been communicating, the way the government's been almost managing the situation. And we're seeing that through daily updates coming through from the government and the like. As time goes on, there is the potential that the impact of the virus on companies here will start impacting financially on companies and the like. So in the UK, we've seen the concept of furlough being introduced, where companies can basically put people, not lay them off, but basically put them on hold in the short term to then re-employ them when things pick up. Should that type of measure be introduced in Singapore, have you got a view on how that would impact on employment passes or people's ability to stay in Singapore?
So I think this is why I have been so grateful to the partnership that we've got with the British Chamber of Commerce, the surveys that you're running, and the fact that members take the time not only to answer your stock questions, but to give details about the kind of things that are bothering them. That gives my team and I a chance to follow up on the things that are really bothering a number of members, and to go and talk to the Singapore government. Furlough would be an example. I think it's obviously up to the Singapore government to decide how all of these things are implemented. In the case of furlough, I think we would want to talk to them to try and encourage that there is a sympathetic approach. If somebody has been kind of put on furlough with the expectation that in a couple of months they will start working again, but they have based themselves and their family here, they've made their life here in Singapore, we would want to encourage a kind of sympathetic approach to what that might mean about work passes. Singapore will make its decision, but I think I am very happy alongside the British Chamber of Commerce to raise those issues and concerns on behalf of the British business community.
I suppose two linked questions to that. One is around obviously in the event that an employment pass is halted, obviously there's the 30-day time to leave the country. Again, that's an area that you'd look to influence with the government around how we can provide longer for people to adjust.
Yeah, and we have spoken to them about that. So far, they've been pretty firm on making sure that the 30 days is the 30 days. So I think we all live in Singapore, we know how it operates. I think they give us clear rules and they expect us to abide by them. That is one instance where it could. If there are particular exceptional or compassionate reasons, we could support again to try and raise those issues. And we will always do what we can to support those that are exceptionally vulnerable and in exceptional need.
And again, I suppose the final related question that is around tenancy agreements. We all have large personal liabilities in terms of tenancy agreements, and the diplomatic clauses will kick in after the first year. Again, is that something that's been raised already or could be raised in the future?
So I think it was really interesting that it was raised in the survey. I think we were starting to think about that, and I'm sure the Singapore government is as well. Again, amongst a package of things that we could raise and say, look, this is what our businesses who have based themselves here are concerned about. We could also raise that. Okay.
And then maybe moving on, talking about...
Could I just say about dependents?
Of course.
Because we've talked about that. So I think some of the most distressing cases that we've had of people being caught by the ban on re-entry without permission are people where a dependent, somebody who's maybe 18 or 19 in full-time education, has been caught by that and hasn't been able to get back. I just wanted to say to anybody that's in that situation that Minister for Asia Pacific, Nigel Adams, raised that with the Singapore High Commissioner last week. The Foreign Secretary raised that as an issue, encouraging sort of compassionate treatment of these cases by the Singapore government. He raised that when he spoke to the Foreign Minister here, and I'm following up as well with the Foreign Minister during the course of this week, because I know that's something, I'm a parent, I know how I would feel about that. I know Singapore are really serious about doing what they can to protect all of us that live in this community from imported cases of coronavirus. But I didn't want the moment to pass without me sharing with members that's what we're doing on that case.
That's a very good point, thank you. Maybe looking at business support then, maybe looking more to the future. So We know that the UK government has introduced a raft of measures, an economic stimulus package to support British business based in the UK.
Yeah.
And the Singapore government has similarly done a resiliency budget to support Singapore business here. Do you have a view or opinion how those respective packages would impact on British-owned businesses in Singapore?
So I think there's a lot of detail that lies behind what they have put out there. Our team has been looking at it in detail, and I know so has yours. For British Singapore registered companies that are owned by British people who employ Singapore citizens and PRs, I think there is access to the Singapore government package. Likewise, for companies, including SMEs, that have bases back in the UK, have operations back in the UK, they will likely be able to get access to some of the support that was announced by our Chancellor Sunak. If anybody has another circumstance where they feel that they are unsure about whether they can get access to any of the packages of support being offered, I think both the British Chamber and we would like to hear from them. The Department for International Trade team inside the British High Commission is looking at all these issues across the region. We're really keen to do whatever we can to support British businesses within the limits of what is within our power. But I think keeping the flow of information about what is proving challenging into view is going to help us, put us in the best position to have those kind of conversations with either UK or Singapore authorities.
And maybe one area of challenge that people are feeling at the moment is the impact of the border closure and the need to maintain free trade and inflow of goods. Do you have a view or a wider perspective on that at the moment?
So the G20 virtual summit happened last week, and leaders, and Singapore was included in that. You may have seen Prime Minister Lee's pictures of himself taking part in that. They asked trade ministers to follow up and think of what could be done collectively to keep supply chains open. Now, I think everybody knows that the solution to us coming out of this is going to be maintaining open trade flows. There is anxiety, there is worry. There has been for a while a bit of a protectionist kind of move in some countries. I think the UK isn't in that position. We are really committed to maintaining open supply chains, open free trade, and so is the government of Singapore. So I see us as kind of key partners in this. Secretary of State for International Trade, Liz Truss, attended the virtual G20 trade ministers, and they committed there to work together to do what they can to keep supply chains open. So I would see that as a major piece of future work, I think, in which the DIT team here in Singapore and across the region, working with Natalie Black, the Trade Commissioner, will be taking that forward. It'll be a major plank of work for us.
Yeah. And looking to the future then, maybe could you summarise what the UK government is doing to support British business around the longer term impact of COVID then as well?
Yeah, so I think we all know that things are probably going to be very different for quite an extended period of time. So I think there is something about thinking about how we can transform the type of business that we do and what support we can give to that. For a long time, the British government has had its focus on what are going to be the future areas of growth. And I think, for example, the tech sector absolutely has been one of the strongest areas of growth, something we're really proud of. There's a really strong ecosystem. But at the same time, a lot of the companies that are cutting edge and that are trying new things are on the smaller end. So that is why the Chancellor has been giving a lot of thought, and the Business Secretary and the Department for International Trade have been thinking really carefully about how can you support those companies that look like they could be really fantastic performers, not just in the UK, but globally, to continue to survive through this period. It's going to be challenging. So I think keeping trade flows going, looking at how we can support companies as they go through a particularly challenging economic period when we're going to see GDPs going down, we're going to see growth rates going down right across the world. What can we do to support? And I think the British government has been really clear that we will do what it takes to support our economy and making sure that it's ready to bounce back as soon as it possibly can. Singapore government has taken a similar approach, and that will continue to be a major topic of conversation between us at the British High Commission and our Singapore government colleagues.
Excellent. So, Cara, maybe a final wrap-up summary, advice from the High Commission to the British Chamber members and actually the wider business group in Singapore.
So what I would like is people to help themselves as much as possible. We try to keep information flowing, so do the British Chamber, and I think the Singapore government comms effort has been really, really strong as well. So helping yourselves as much as possible, keeping the flow of information coming into us, including via the Chamber. I think you're a really useful convener of information, sentiment and challenges that people are experiencing that allows us to really understand what we should be prioritising in the work that we're doing. And I think follow the rules, but also, don't avoid coming to us if there's a real issue which is a kind of compassionate in nature, or where somebody has become particularly vulnerable. We have finite resources inside the High Commission. We need to focus on those that most need our help. I think the British community here in Singapore have been absolutely fantastic through this. They have showed real resilience. They have showed seriousness about how they engage with the issues and their willingness to comply with all of the regulations that have been set out by the government here. And like you said at the beginning, ongoing confidence in Singapore as a regional hub. So thanks to them for everything they have been doing in helping us try to be as effective as we can be.
Cara, again, on behalf of the Chamber and the members, thank you very much for your time. I know your team are really busy, so I really appreciate the fact you've come in today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.